Hey, family, we are so excited to bring another season of Theology in 30 to the Hope TV. Listen, before I start this episode, I want to say thank you to our executive director, Dr. E. Dewey Smith Jr., and the entire Hope TV family for bringing us back for a second season. Just to give you a little history, Theology in 30 was birthed out of my desire to engage in dialogue around theology, culture, to just talk about preaching and theology with my colleagues, mentors, family, and people who are just curious about theology. So let me stop right here and say that you don't have to be a theologian or a pastor to enjoy Theology in 30. We also want to thank all of our supporters who have been rocking with us for the entire first season and then this season. Your support is appreciated. And so you know what I need y'all to do. I need you to talk to me in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. Let me know that you're here. In addition, you can ask questions. Yes, you can ask your questions live while we are on. And one of us, either myself or our amazing guest, will answer your questions while you are watching. And so I need our viewing audience finally to do two things. I need you to do two things. I need you to follow us on Instagram at The Hope TV. And second, we'd like you to share the link of this episode to all of your social media platforms or whatever platforms you have available, because we know you have friends. We know you have people in your network who are curious about theology too. So thank you so much. Those of you who have been hanging out with us on Theology in 30, you know that I love great preaching. I love Black preaching. And that's why I'm devoting the next 2 years of my life to write about and to study the history of folk preaching. I'm in the last 2 years of my PhD program. Y'all give me some love in the comments. Y'all know it's been a journey. And so as I think about what made me fall in love with preaching, what makes me want to devote the next 2 years studying folk preaching, looking specifically at the history of folk preaching, is that I love how there's so many ways that we can preach this gospel effectively. And our guest today is an incredible, when I say incredible, he is an incredible preacher. I've known him for several years. My brother is hanging out with us today. Dr. J.C. Howard from our House of Hope Macon campus agreed to stop by Theology in 30. So y'all already know I need you to share. I need you to share this video right now because I know that he's gonna bless us. So let me share a little bit about Dr. J.C. Howard. I know many of you know him, but I'm going to share a little bit about his history before he came to us. Having been reared in the church all of his life, Dr. Howard served faithfully in many capacities before accepting his call to ministry in 2006. He was licensed to the gospel ministry by the Cathedral of Fresh Fire, Reverend Emma L. Creamer, who is the senior pastor there, in 2007. He went on to graduate with honors from the world-renowned Morehouse College in 2009 in Atlanta, Georgia, where he double majored in religion and history. He was afforded the opportunity to serve at the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel as an assistant, and now has been inducted to the prestigious, come on, MLK Junior Morehouse Board of Preachers. He's definitely deserving of that. He's also a proud member of the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. And he also effectively served as a youth pastor of Gospel Tabernacle, which has 2 locations during his college matriculation. Recently, he graduated from my alma mater, Emory University, the Candler School of Theology, with a doctorate in ministry, and his project focused on millennial retention and organic growth. He also holds an MDiv, Master of Divinity degree from Princeton Theological Seminary. He is the father of one daughter, Ryan, who he is so proud of. She is his pride and joy. And so y'all know what I need you to do, Theology in 30 family. I need you to put some love in the comments for our guest today on Theology in 30, the Dr. J.C. Howard. Say hello to everybody today.
What's up? What's up, beautiful people? It is an absolute joy to be with you, Pastor Jen, and to be with the wonderful people, obviously, of Hope TV, and whom I am indeed familiar with. And so what's up, fam? It's good to see everybody, and it's good to be a part of just this honorable and incredible platform. Thank you, Pastor Jen.
Thank you. So you already know, we're just going to jump in. You are my daddy's favorite preacher. For those who are watching, my parents live in Macon, And whenever they can get away from their church, my dad still pastors, they go and hear Dr. JC, and it becomes our Sunday dinner conversation. So thank you for the impact that you are not only making in the kingdom and in the greater Macon area, but thank you for the impact you're making upon my family. So let's jump in. My first question for you is, what is Black preaching in your mind? And as you describe it, what must it include or exclude? Let's go.
Well, first, I just want to thank you for those kind words, because your daddy is a gatekeeper in the
Yeah.
city of Macon. He is indeed a giant, and so even just to hear that, I get goosebumps. My hair is raising on my arm right now, and so thank you for that. I love your dad. I love your family altogether.
We love
So
you.
Black preaching, appreciate that. Black preaching to me specifically, in my opinion, Black preaching um, speaks and it lifts up the Black condition, right?
Mm,
Black preaching speaks to, and it also lifts up the Black condition, which evolves, right? The Black condition
mhm,
actually revolves what Black folk are dealing with.
mhm,
It's sonic. It's also um, it's call and response, right? And the Black preacher is always looking for an amen,
mm.
because we are a very sonic and rhythmic people. Black preaching is rhythmic. It very much is rhythmic. It's soulful. But in terms of content, the Black preacher, and Black preaching specifically, it speaks to the Black condition. It lifts up the Black condition and makes it applicable not just for Black people, right? Black preaching isn't
Yeah.
designed just for Black people. I think that we need to
Yes.
make sure that we mention that and we contextualize that,
I love it.
because
I love
when
it.
people hear the phrase Black preaching, they think it's preaching just designed for Black people, and that's not the case. It speaks to the Black condition, it lifts up the Black condition, but it's not designed just for Black people. It's designed for all people, right? Because all people, in one way or another, have to deal with what the Black condition deals with. And the Black condition has been historically rooted in a effort to be liberated, right, from social,
Mm,
from theological, from political constructs that are oppressive and that are
come on.
marginalized. And so, as a consequence, if we're going to talk about the Black condition, and you're going to talk about liberation from oppression, marginalization, political, and even economic oppression. Well, every race deals with that in one way or another. All white
Yes.
people aren't rich white people, right?
Yeah.
All Spanish folk aren't rich Spanish folk, and so as a consequence, everything that consumes the Black condition can be felt in the condition of any other race. And so that's why I feel as if Black preaching specifically isn't just designed for Black people, but it's designed for people at large. And we use our experience in order to speak to the woes of society, but that meet everybody where they are. And so, Black preaching in that context is what I believe. I mean, it's what I that's excuse me. That's what I believe Black preaching to be in that context. Yep.
I think you've defined it in an excellent way. I was speaking with one of my mentors just yesterday, and I quoted Dolan Hubbard, who is speaking about Howard Thurman, when he
Yes.
says
Yes.
that African Americans are the only ones who were able to take a psychological shackle and turn it into a weapon. That's what we
Wow.
did in our preaching. Our
Wow.
preaching is this liberative power that comes forth in our in our church experience, in our worship experience, and it brings hope to our people. It brings hope to people everywhere.
For Friends in the Book podcast, reading and reviewing the conversation by Hill Harper. If you have any desires to be in a relationship, to be married, I think it is a must that you have a conversation.
I think too, he talked about in the book being honest in your communication. Say a woman might be insecure about how she's looking, and instead of being honest with that about her partner, she'll say like, "Does this dress make me look fat?" And I think both men and women need to tap into how they're really feeling about something and be able to have that vulnerability and be comfortable. And like Chris said, have that environment where you can be honest.
In the society that we were brought up in, it's very hard on little black boys. You have to navigate feelings and emotions so the world don't get you.
Sometimes when I cry, I won't know how I'm feeling or why I'm crying.
I just grew up never feeling like it was okay to cry.
Yeah.
And so he really forced me to have to reconnect with the kid that didn't get to cry.
That's beautiful.
We don't cry. We gon' take our piece of the
Please send us relief, oh God. Lord.
I want to encourage everyone that has new music out or has new music coming out to not be grand. Get out there and work. If Mary Mary still have to promote a record, if Kirk Franklin still has to promote a record, you do too. So get out there and grind and don't wait for it to come to you. Go get it. There's space for all of us.
Just like a river now. Make God our heart. Make God our heart. Tell somebody.
So I want to shift into a question about your formation, because we
Sure.
preach out of our context. We preach out of our experiences. And so I want to know, who are your influencers? Who are the preachers that, when you think about how your homiletic was shaped, because listen, you do Black preaching without even thinking about it. It's a part of your DNA, your homiletical method, your homiletical theology embraces the stories of those who are of the those who descended from the African diaspora. So I want to ask you, who are your influencers? Who are the preachers and the voices that you've been influenced by the most?
So it's a handful. So I have indeed, and I'm just so grateful. I'm just so grateful to be a part of this pantheon of preachers. I really don't take it lightly to even just be a preacher, and to be able to be connected to this tradition, because this tradition is extremely rich. It's extremely valuable, and it should be protected. It should be curated the way that you're curating it right now. You're actually working you're working even in this moment as a curator of Black preaching and Black preachers. And so I really value what you're doing, Pastor Jen, as one of what I believe to be one of the greatest preachers on the planet. But individuals that influenced me significantly in my preaching, there's a handful of individuals, and I want to start with my mother in ministry, who you spoke about in the bio. Her name was Pastor Emma L. Kramer. She's recently transitioned from earth to glory in 2020. She transitioned, but she had just an incredible impact on my life. Pentecostal. One of the reasons why she was so impactful on my ministry wasn't just because of her preaching prowess, which she was an incredible preacher, but it was really her narrative and her story. She came up in the Kojic Church, and her pastor, Bishop Ross B. Rainey, who was a legend in the Delaware and Philadelphia area, major Kojic pastor, he reared her in ministry, and she became a national evangelist in like the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And she preached all around the country, driving her Cadillac and her 3 kids in the back seat from engagement to engagement. But the reason why she's so impactful on my ministry is because she was ostracized and she was marginalized as a woman in ministry. She very much, her pastor really tapped her to be his successor when he was making a transition, and he transitioned, he passed away, and not the church, because the church very much wanted her to be the pastor, but the leaders, which were all men, And we understand that in the Kojic church, it's still a very patriarchal and a male-driven leadership culture. And so as a consequence, the men there, the elders, they did not believe that a woman was entitled or qualified to be a pastor. And so she fought. She was literally in a fight with them and even got legal. But nevertheless, God spoke to her and said, don't fight, just praise me. And she ended up organizing her own ministry, which didn't just become larger than the church that she came out of, but in fact became one of the largest ministries in Wilmington, Delaware today. And as a consequence of her perseverance, as a consequence of seeing how marginalized and ostracized she was as a woman, and yet continue to walk in her purpose and become one of the premier preachers and pastors in the city, it resonates with me on a deep level that I might not even be able to articulate. And so my mother in ministry, the Reverend Emma L. Creamer, is a significant impact. The Reverend Dr. Lawrence Edward Carter of Morehouse College, the dean of the Martin Luther King International Chapel, he taught me what it meant to be intellectual with your preaching. And having an understanding that preaching deals with the spirit, but you also have to bring a particular level of intellect and information to the preaching moment, not just relying on the Holy Ghost, but you need to do some work with your mind as well. You need to structure your preaching, right? He taught us how to structure sermons. And so he was not just one of the greatest pastoral influences, even though he didn't pastor traditionally in a church, but it was through Dr. Lawrence Edward Carter's chapel assistance program that we get some of the greatest preachers in the country. Nichelle Guidry was a chapel assistant. Willie Francois, E. Dewey Smith Jr., Jamal Bryant, Otis Moss III. I can go on and on about Morehouse preachers and Spelman preachers that came through that chapel and sat under the tutelage of Dr. Carter. And so although he did not pastor a traditional congregation, he pastored pastors. He taught us what it meant to preach intellectually. The Reverend Dr. E. Dewey Smith Jr., who is very much my mentor, big brother, and the executive director, obviously, and the visionary of the House of Hope Enterprise. I was a youth pastor while I was at Morehouse College with Bishop Wiley Jackson here in Atlanta, Georgia. But after our second service, I would sneak over to Traveler's Rest when it was over there by the mall, H.F. Shepherd Drive, at the 12 o'clock service. At the 12 o'clock service, that's back when you used to have that low cut. Pastor Jen used to have that low cut. That thing was sharp, girl. You used to have that low cut, girl, with the little flips up. You know, they used to flip up like that. Pastor Jen was sharp. She's always been sharp, y'all. I need y'all to understand, Pastor Jen has always been sharp, and she's always been a killer. When I say killer, I'm talking about preacher. And so that's what I was really first introduced to your ministry. But y'all had a 12 o'clock third service, and Pastor Smith would be most of the time dead tired by that third service, but would preach with such power. And so I had a chance to really sit under him. So the Reverend Dr. E. Dewey Smith Jr., my favorite preacher of all time, Bishop Noel Jones. Bishop Noel Jones is my favorite preacher of all time. He is the one who introduced me to psychological preaching. And preaching that affects not just the spirit, but also the mind. Just one of my greatest influences in all of the world. I have a very special place in my heart for Bishop Noel Jones. But if I can take it back just a little bit, I also was very much shaped, even though obviously I didn't get a chance to meet him. But shape, and it sounds probably a little redundant because a lot of preachers probably mention this preacher, and I had no idea who he was before I got to college. And his name was the Reverend Dr. Gardner Taylor. Gardner Taylor, I had a chance to meet him with some other Morehouse preachers. He was preacher for Pastor Fleming in Atlanta over there by Greenbrier, and this was one of his, probably, close to one of his last preaching engagements. And he preached about the New Jerusalem. Dr. Gardner Taylor used the language in a way I've never heard anybody use the language.
Listen.
Pastor Jen, his preaching was poetry.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have to raise his voice if he didn't want to. He didn't have to be harmonic or musical. He didn't have to have a crazy shutdown or close. But the poetry and the way he used the language, we see this in Pastor Donald Parsons.
Yes.
The way that he uses the language and strings words together taught me that preaching is not just writing down some punchlines that's going to shout people.
Right.
But preaching requires the work of an architect, somebody who can, in a lack of a better term, bring words together to convey the beauty of struggle.
Ooh, wait a minute.
Somebody that can bring words together that can actually convey the beauty of struggle. I never felt so good as a struggling college student as when I heard Pastor Gardner Taylor preach. Okay, I said, listen, I accept the struggle. I accept the struggle. I accept it because of the poetic nature of his preaching. It was so iconic and just so beautiful, masterful. And so he taught me that there should be an element of your preaching that is poetic. That the words that fall on people's ears, even though you might even be talking about a struggle, it sounds so beautiful. Those are probably the most impactful preachers in my life. I also have to speak to a brother in the tri-state area, as to not exhaust this question, by the name of Pastor Hayward Hamilton. I came out of a context where I didn't really see young preachers growing up. That wasn't a phenomenon in my area. It was a phenomenon in the DMV. And so before I got to Atlanta, I was in Baltimore for a while, and I started meeting these young guys my age who were preachers. And I'm like, how are y'all preaching? Like, you're not even 30, you know what I mean? You're not even 20, and you're a preacher? These guys like, I've been preaching since I was 14, 15. I did not see that. The only young preacher I had ever seen up until that point was an absolutely powerful sister out of Baltimore by the name of Juanita Conti, Pastor Juanita Conti. And Pastor Juanita Conti is somebody's preacher. And she started preaching at like 12. And she came to our church one time, and I was flabbergasted. I never seen anything like that. But when I got to around the age 14, there was this young guy who was like 21, 22, preaching all around the city, all around Philadelphia, all around New Jersey. And his name was Hayward Hamilton. And he took me under his wing, and he showed me you don't have to be an old guy, or you don't have to be an old person to preach. If God has called you, like he called Jeremiah at a young age, then do the work. And he showed me that I didn't have to run from my calling, or I didn't have to wait until I was 25 plus to accept the calling, but that I could accept it right now, even with flaws and all, and I can be the preacher that God has called me to be. So he was the one who showed me you don't have to be 25 plus or 30 plus to be a preacher. You can be a preacher right now. And I accepted my call, and I began to preach at the age of 18 years old. So those are my greatest influences in Black preaching.
So thank you for sharing that. I didn't want to interrupt you because how we are formed shapes our homiletical method and our homiletical theology. So I wanted to give you time to take us on that journey with you.
Thank you. And shout out to all of those people, man. I love y'all.
Yeah. And what I love about your preaching is that it makes theology accessible to the ear of those who are formally trained and those who are not. As I shared, you're my dad's favorite preacher, and my dad is very much so a traditional folk preacher in the truest sense. He's going to slow walk you through his theology in the beginning. He's going to talk about the Trinity, and then he's going to transition into the text. So now I want to engage you at the place of method because we're running out of time. In your preaching, there is a clear homiletical theology, a clear theology of preaching. And so I want you to articulate for us, in your estimations, what your theology of preaching is. What is that theological claim that shows up again and again. Now, before I allow you to answer that, I want to say I believe your preaching forces or pushes people to a place of social activism.
Sure.
I believe that's the kind of preaching you do. But I want to hear from you. What do you see as your theology of preaching?
I am very much a deliverance preacher. I think I get that from my Pentecostal roots. I'm a deliverance preacher. I'm a transformation preacher. I believe in the power of transformation. And so if there was one theological claim that you could find streamlined through all of my preaching, it's that through the love and the sacrifice, let me put it this way, through the sacrificial love of Jesus Christ, any of us and all of us can be transformed in any regard.
Come on.
The beautiful thing about transformation is that it can meet you in any area or any genre or any compartmentalized issue that you're dealing with. Some of us need transformation in our mentality. Some of us need transformation in our finances. Some of us need transformation in our parenting. But whatever it is, transformation is available in that area. And because of the sacrificial love of Jesus Christ, you can be transformed. We're all becoming, right? In the words of Paul Tillich, we are all in the process of becoming who we are one day to be. Dr. Carter used to always say, "You're soon becoming what you one day shall be."
Yes, I heard him say that.
And so I am a deliverance and transformation preacher very much. You always hear streamlined throughout my preaching the ability to change. But you're also going to very much hear in my preaching the use of the Black condition, and the history of oppression, the history of fighting with liberation, oppression, marginalization, and ostracization from different areas of society, because we can be marginalized in many different kinds of ways. And so the understanding of transformation through liberation, right? Before I can change, I gotta be liberated. And so you hear these concepts streamlined through all of my preaching, no matter what the sermon series is. It could be a series on prayer. Right now I'm preaching on patience. Just came out of a series on the power of the mind and what it means to be Christ conscious. You're always going to hear, Pastor Jen, that through the sacrificial love of Jesus Christ, you have the power to be transformed, or the power to be better today than you were yesterday, and to be better tomorrow than you are today. And so I try to interconnect those theological themes of liberation and transformation, using the Black condition, and using, obviously, and most importantly, the Word of God. I'm a Bible preacher. I'm going to preach that text. And so using the Word of God to do that.
Honey, what I think you need is a socket wrench.
I played JV basketball.
I'm sorry. I don't think it looks right.
This is good, and it's all good, baby.
Is it really all good?
If you love me enough to routinely test your handyman skills, not to mention the strength of your marriage, then of course you'll visit nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat to make sure I'm in the right car seat.
I'm gonna call my dad.
We're talking about healthy aging and healthy living.
I'm so passionate about feeding your skin the truth. And the truth is with fruits, vegetables, and all type of herbs. And that's really my motto, is feed your skin the truth.
Yes, you do it well. As you
That's
were
right.
sharing, I thought of a quote by Dr. Frank Thomas. He says that we throw the gospel on conquered bodies and destroyed lives. Again, we throw the gospel, or we drop, as preachers, we drop the gospel on conquered bodies and destroyed lives. And so I see your preaching being that. It helps us to mine the hope in any situation. And I think that that's the kind of preaching that we need right now. So this is the part of Theology in 30 that I like the least. We are running out of time.
I
So
hate it. I hate it. I just got started.
Right? That just means we're going to have you back. That's all that means.
Part two, Pastor Jen. Part two. We've already put it in the works.
Part 2. Yes. But I want to ask you to just kind of put a bow on everything, conclude our conversation with your best advice, listen, to preachers who feel unseen. With the oversaturation of social media preaching, everybody, no shade. I mean, I love the word, and I'm glad everybody, everybody's able to be, an Instagram preacher if they want to, and we are public theologians, and that's okay. However, it can make some of us feel lost in this huge sea of public theologians and voices on social media. So I want to ask you, what advice do you have for preachers who don't feel seen, who are doing the work, who are thoughtful, who are theologically sound, but just don't have the stage or the platform to share? And if they do, they feel like they're not reaching what some other voices who may not have the same desire for depth. Those are the voices, it seems, are getting more followers. That's an issue that a lot of people struggle with. And so I want to hear from you as we close today. What advice do you have for preachers who don't feel seen, but they're doing the work?
Well, I want to remind those of us preachers that we live in a soundbite culture. And because we live in a soundbite culture, it's not hard to understand why people subscribe to soundbite preaching. Everything else they're getting is in sound bites. People don't even go on to watch entire YouTube videos anymore. They just watch the video story. They might not even look at your video, the stuff you post in your normal Instagram. They go to your story, right? And then they keep it moving, because we live in a soundbite culture. I need what I want in the most minimum time as possible. And so I don't want you to be offended, preacher, because we live in a soundbite culture. So it's not a surprise that people subscribe to soundbite preaching. But the first thing that I would admonish, and Dr. Jamal Bryant said something very powerful back in 2020. He said that the pandemic gave us all a level playing field. We all became social media preachers of a sort, right? We all had to transition to online and to Facebook Live and to YouTube, right? And so these are platforms that you really should be familiar with right now, because they inundate the culture. So you have to be engaging with these platforms if you want to minister to the culture. Now, with that being said, I want to give just this piece of advice to us preachers who may feel overlooked or may feel stepped over in a regard. First of all, you have to keep reading no matter what. Read, and read some more. And the reason why I say that is so that you can always remain sharp. You can always remain sharp without the book being in front of you. You have to be ready. Reading keeps you ready. It really does. It informs your intellectual prowess in a way that you don't even see. And so reading is the most important thing that the preacher probably can do outside of prayer. But other than the reading component, and here's the thing that's most critical, is consistency. You have to be consistent. Everybody that goes viral on accident. They don't go viral on purpose. Most viral videos, now you do have like big time YouTubers who construct things in order to go viral, but at that point, they already have a lot of followers or subscribers. What you have to look at is the trend of going viral. Going viral generally happens by accident, whether it be positive or negative. People that put up videos or make tweets or whatever, they will tell you, I didn't even think that people would see it. And then next thing you know, you got 1 million viewers, right? To this particular thing that you did on accident. That is simply because, Pastor Jen, going viral is actually an accidental occurrence. And so if you're always sharp and ready and you put out content, you don't know what's going to go viral. That's why you got to always be sharp. That's why you have to always be sharp, because you have no idea what's going to always go viral. And so most people who get major platforms, it's not even an intentional thing. Sometimes it's just something that happens organically. And that's why it's always necessary for us to be ready. So consistency is the most important thing. If you say, I'm going to get on live every Monday at 6 o'clock and do this, I'm gonna do a spiritual reflection, then you can't miss a Monday. Now you might not have anybody watching it for 6 weeks in a row, but the consistency of you doing that thing, at some point somebody's gonna catch it. Jake's became Jake's because Jane Crouch happened to be in a West Virginia hotel room watching a local program. It happened on accident. But he was consistent in who he was then to who he is right now. My point is, consistency is, and I'm dealing with this right now, Pastor Jen. Consistency. I have a podcast, and sometimes I get so busy, I miss it, and this, that, and the third. And I have people who say, yo, you gotta stop missing weeks, man. You know what I'm saying? Like we want the content. And so consistency is the most important thing. If you have a vision, and even if you feel like nobody's listening, even if you feel like nobody's hearing you, somebody hears you. Somebody's listening. Somebody's catching hold of your content. And so it's necessary for you, preacher, to be consistent. Because if you're consistent, and here's my last punchline, Pastor Jen, if you're consistent, you won't have to chase the platform. The platform will chase you.
Listen, this has been another incredible, amazing episode of Theology in 30. Dr. JC, thank you for being
I had so much fun. I had so much fun. You got to get me back on, Pastor Jen. I know it's crass. I know it's crass and unpolite to invite yourself places, but you're so incredible, and I love you so dearly. I need you to bring your boy back on. We have some more to talk about. I know we do.
Here's what I need you to understand. You will be back. You are family. And I just thank you for your transparency and for making your homiletical method accessible to preachers who may be watching. You really made it clear for us today, and I appreciate you.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful.
This has been Theology in 30 on the Hope TV. We are the House of Hope, where we believe that life with God is better in every way, every day. Our pastor is the Dr. E. Dewey Smith Jr., and we appreciate the fact that you decided to watch this episode of Theology in 30. Family, have a great week. In the words of our pastor, if you're good to God, he'll be good to you. See y'all next time.